Hi, it's Kirby Summers. Today is October 12th. It's Saturday. And this is a sort of catching up. I am going to be talking about the Illuminati and other things. There are other phrases for the Illuminati. People call them the elite, the shadow government. In fact, while I am wrapping up the last chapter of my book, Chasing Chandler, the second edition, about Rachel Chandler's family, who many of you know owned the Los Angeles Times and who were in the publishing business for 4 years, in addition to starting Hollywood, starting a lot of the businesses that we know of today. Well, years and years ago, an author made the discovery in California, where the Hollywood industry is, where the music industry ended up, that it was not just like the seat of crime, but that there was a shadow government of which the Chandlers were a very big part of. And of course, with all of the other research that I have, most of which can be found on my Substack and also on Patreon. In fact, I'll be uploading some additional content for patrons only soon. So I don't want you guys to think I forgot you. I have not. I'm just putting aside special information that I'm only going to share there. Well, while wrapping up the book, Chasing Chandler, and again, there's a link that I will include below where you could read a preview. If you want to go ahead and order it, because I include a lot of new information that I had not included before. But what's interesting is that long before anyone, and certainly anyone that's living today, there was talk that there was a shadow government running California, from where we got Ronald Reagan. He was involved in the industry, right? And the industry is the entertainment industry. And we got Richard Nixon, first president ever to have to resign office because of his ways. And so what I have been hearing is Jaguar, Wright, and Katt Williams have made it clear that the Illuminati are after them for exposing what she has been exposing. Hey, I want to take this opportunity to ask you to subscribe if you haven't, to give this a like, because it helps the algorithm. They're afraid for their lives. And of course, that's really what happens. I have shared with you that in my own circumstance, I've survived 3 attempts on my life that I'm aware of. I was kidnapped and held hostage at knife point and managed by the grace of God to escape. And that's just what I'm aware of. And in their case, they're basically saying specifically the Illuminati. What I find troubling is that when I listen to people who have written books, let's say, on other child trafficking rings, and very clearly they come out and make the statement, oh, well, I don't believe in the Illuminati. The way that I feel about it is perhaps this person does not want to get in trouble. That's a possibility. And or they haven't done enough research, or maybe they're working on behalf of the state. I'm using the state in capital letters because I'm going to read to you information, historical information on the Illuminati. It's not like a fake thing. All right. Secret societies have existed for centuries. And at one point in 1776, a German professor named Adam Weishaupt, he founded the Bavarian Illuminati. It was in response to the Roman Catholic Church's power over philosophical and scientific thought. And what he aimed to do was to recruit other people from within the Freemasons. And that's still a secret society that is still around today. And in fact, in Rachel Chandler's ancestry, which I go into, many generations before she was ever born. I let you know, yeah, this guy was a Freemason, this guy was this guy was that. And so over the course of the next decade, he accrued an estimated 2,500 members, right? And this is in Michael Barkin's book named A Culture of Conspiracy. And he goes on to say that the Illuminati supposedly disbanded by 1787 and seemed to remain inactive. But then what really happened was it submerged. So it was no longer something that everyone knew about. Only certain people knew about it. Those people who work in the club, so to speak, right? And then the talk about this secret society where the elite sort of like, which is like the realm of the elite, that basically started to resurface in a speech made by President George H.W. Bush that he made after the end of the Cold War. And then he mentioned a new phrase that he actually brought into mainstream. He called it the New World Order. And so some people interpreted that it was a sign that the Illuminati had either been reconstituted, so reorganized, or that it had never left. I found it interesting that Piers Morgan removed the Jaguar Wright portion of the interview after she was kind enough to appear on his show. He goes on to state that she made false claims. I, for one, believe her 100%. I believe Katt Williams 100%. Jay-Z's lawyer contacted his people because I suppose his wife, and you know who that is, demanded he do so. It's been my experience that if you're telling the truth and people don't want it to be known, you ignore them. What I found unusual was that in this case, not only did they not ignore her, they're now chasing anyone. He's mainstream. Piers Morgan is mainstream, demanding that they remove her specific interview. I think what's happening is that because this is surrounding, let's say, Sean Combs with a whole group of co-conspirators, and it exposes the Black Illuminati, which I have again written about on my Substack. And it's sort of like what she's talking about primarily are other people in the music industry. I mean, she does mention from time to time Clive Davis, who I'm surprised nobody has said was a protege of Jewish mobster Meyer Lansky. But he was. He was. In a minute, I'm going to get to Tommy Mottola as it pertains to the Epstein-Leslie Wexner nexus. So hold on. I think what's happening is that it's breaking the color barrier. So the divide and conquer method has been used against the populace, every one of us, forever, right? If you divide and conquer, divide and conquer, divide and conquer, eventually we're so fragmented that no group is able to remain cohesive and fight in a cohesive manner. And we see that happening as we look at what's happening to the hip hop industry, the rap industry, which is primarily Black, with the exception of, let's say, Eminem, who, from what I have been studying, it's clear to me that he was basically allowed to rise, inserted, to make room for someone like Sean Combs, right? Which is, again, an effort to destroy the population that would listen to hip hop and that would listen to rap. Because if you listen to the lyrics, as many of you have by now, you will see that they're very misogynistic, that they're very, it's like, you can just go out and kill anyone, as we're hearing about the fact that Combs allegedly had certain people killed. I mean, this is heavy stuff. A lot of people will joke and say, well, I've got my popcorn out. Well, I don't think any of this is a joke. We're talking about human trafficking. And I said on the other day when I uploaded a podcast here that this is endemic to our society. It's not limited to, let's say, the hip hop industry, the music industry, the Hollywood. It's endemic. They use blackmail on each other, right? But the SA is a problem. It's a problem. Jaguar Wright, a couple of years ago, spilled some tea on Mariah Carey. We all know that her voice, like Whitney Houston, is beautiful. Okay, she's got one of the better voices out there, and she was the best in her time. However, in order for Tommy Mottola, Tommy Mottola, who's also got a hand in the stew that's happening right now, all of this stuff. And by the way, I've included a photo on this podcast. The cover photo is from the 2005 Victoria's Secret show. They used to have an annual show. Victoria's Secret, you may remember who owned it? Yes, Leslie Wexner. Who was seated in the front row? His good friend, Jeffrey Epstein, who's seated a couple of seats behind him. I'm going to let you find Tommy Mottola, because I'm not going to put an arrow and do that, but he's seated a couple of rows behind with his then wife. I don't know if they're still together, Thalia, who is a Mexican singer. What Jaguar said a couple of years ago is that even with her voice, that when she went in to get her demo tape approved, Mottola had her get on her, the same way that Sean Combs did to the then young little boy. I'm going to try not to mention everybody's name here, but you know who I'm talking about. And by the way, someone forwarded me a tape of Bieber in a room with a bunch of guys. With Sean Combs was there, and a bunch of other guys were there. He was the only little blonde boy in the room, and he was still a little boy. You can tell he's a little boy, and he was doing that in this tape that I saw. So, like, It was like less than a minute long, but you can tell what it was. So this seems to be the process in Hollywood and in the music industry, and frankly, almost in every place where there's power, where we have a power imbalance, right? If you're working at like a like for Chase, or you're working for another large corporation, and you want to keep your job, and your boss is a creep, that has happened. We've heard about this before. But the fact that somebody like Mariah Carey, with the voice of an angel, had to do that, kind of basically lets you know everybody has had to do that. If you want to be well known, they've gone through the process. And then what happens? You've sold your soul, right? But yeah, Tommy Mottola was definitely part of Epstein and Wexner's group. As we're beginning to see these lines of separation of one group or the other group, they're disappearing, aren't they? What we see is really a power struggle between the elite and the rest of us. If they can destroy us, which they have done, look at the hip hop community, for example. They're killing each other. First, we had Gary Webb expose the drugs coming into the country, allegedly by the three-letter agency, intentionally. In his case, he never said intentionally going into the poor Black communities in LA, because frankly, he wanted to stay away from just, I guess, accusing CIA, who stepped up and spoke to the Black community because they were very upset. And they were like, oh no, I don't know if you guys saw it. You could probably find it on YouTube. When CIA responded after Gary Webb wrote his three-piece article, which then became his book, and then he somehow died. 2 gunshot wounds to the head. Really? You have to shoot yourself a second time after you've, and they called it suicide. So they don't even have to pump the drugs into the poor communities anymore. They just have people kill each other with immunity. With immunity. How do you have immunity? Because you have these people who are, I'm going to call it the shadow government, the Illuminati. And as I write in my book, Chasing Chandler, I expose how it came to be in the United States. Okay, I show, and I give you names and examples and dates, and you can do your own research. I've given you enough information in that book to see how it was always about getting rid of people they consider inferior. You and I were inferior. We're disposable. We can be used as slaves, like I was. People who don't survive, they don't care. We don't see many of them dying. We hear of them dying. Clive Davis is now 92. Leslie Wexner is pushing 90. They live very long lives. How long do, a lot of people that are in the music industry, they die at the age of 27, or they die young because they're worth more dead than alive. What's going on now is fascinating, because It is opening the eyes of many more people who would otherwise not have a clue because it has become mainstream news. Now, they're not talking about the Illuminati. They're not talking about the shadow government. There are a variety of phrases that mean the same thing. But armed with the new information that's being shared, primarily because of the courage of somebody like Jaguar, Wright, and Katt Williams, it is now helping people to keep themselves, their children, and their grandchildren safe. At least I'm hoping, because that's why I do what I do. I share information so that those of you who follow my work on a variety of my platforms become aware of what happens in the shadows, because the power doesn't happen in a way that we can see it. Everything that we see is a construct, right? You watch a Broadway show, that's kind of the way it is. So we're watching a construct. That's not what real life is about. Real life is different. It's what happens behind the scenes. And that's where we really see the wheels of government, let's say. The wheels of government dictate our day-to-day lives to a very big degree, like clearly you're all aware of that. When some people step a little bit too far out of line, these people are, I'm going to use the word sacrifice. I think it's okay to use that word. They're expendable. So Larry King in the Franklin child abuse case became expendable. Craig Spence became expendable, so expendable that he committed suicide behind a door in the Ritz Hotel that had furniture piled up against it, but somehow, so nobody could get in. They tried to tell you, yeah, they can get in. They have ways of climbing up and down buildings. That's how somebody got into my apartment to kill me. Climbed up the side of the building so he would not be seen in the dark. Jeffrey Epstein became expendable. Ghislaine Maxwell became expendable. Sean Combs has become expendable. I do not see Sean Combs ever being allowed to step out of jail and become a free man. He might even be charged with murder. Remember, there's no, it doesn't matter. It doesn't expire. If you've killed someone, they'll go after you. Here's where it gets dicey, right? The they that we're talking about are all in somebody's pocket. So the only way that someone will be charged with, let's say Sean Combs, with the death of two well-known people who I'm referring to, although I'm going to again try not to say too much, is if he has become such a thorn in the side of Clive Davis, and I'm sure he has, because it has dragged his name through the mud. And years ago, I think it was 5 years ago by now, he had this documentary made of him. It's on Netflix. It's like, oh, praising him to the high heavens. He discovered Whitney Houston. It's like a commercial. So he was already planning to, he knew he wasn't going to live longer. So there's this documentary making him look like such a genius. You know, you forget that he started with a 3-letter agency. CBS is one of the original 3 television stations outed during the 1975 Church Committee hearings as having worked with CIA from its inception. Clive Davis was an attorney for CBS, who had a subsidiary, CBS Records, which later became all the other names, because they change names. If there's a scandal, they'll change names, which I think is why Sean Combs has also changed his name. But yeah, I would think that somebody like Clive Davis, who's very close to a higher, much higher level, and part of what we've been talking about. He's still a front guy, though. You know, he is a front guy. Like the father of my abuser is a front guy. He died some years ago, but he was a front guy. And again, they were all connected to the underworld, meaning the mob is as we remember it to be. They're just people who wear suits. Again, it's really difficult looking at this story unfold and knowing that Jaguar and Katt are terrified because whenever someone tries to out horrific behavior, not just against people of age, but against children, come on, against children. We know that somebody as young as 9 was involved in the Combs situation. It's very sad. It's very sad, you know, because it only has to happen once to destroy someone's life, and then it takes forever to try to get a grip. You know, everyone always thinks, oh, what did I do? When it really was never you in the first place. If you're a victim, it was never your fault. You were preyed upon by a predator who was trained by the generation before, who was trained by the generation before. It's passed on in this frame of the Illuminati, very much like Eyes Wide Shut. You've all seen the movie, and if you haven't, you should. Stanley Kubrick, who really, again, it was not the first guy to come out with Eyes Wide Shut. That was from an earlier book that had been also turned into a movie from, I think, 1910, Tram Novel. It's, you know, it's the same. A group of people who get together and do things that most normal people would never imagine. And it includes all of this behavior that the public is now hearing about daily. So I just discovered when I went on my YouTube to see my messages, because I do read them, I may not always have time to answer, but I read them, that Professor Hamamoto, who is one of my favorite people, is going to be on Sean's show, I think this Sunday. So I'm happy for him. I'm just a little surprised that Sean has not invited me. But I remember that he and I had a little bit of friction because of a certain person with the initials WW, who, you know, you have to start wondering why certain people have been placed in the narrative of talking about writing books about Epstein or so and so and so and so. You have to start looking beneath the surface. Who's shilling for who's, and shilling means you're pretend as if you're working independently, but in reality, you have another purpose. This is happening everywhere, especially now with the allegations against Combs. We're seeing a lot of this. It's a little bit more transparent, but I think people are still not aware that some people, while they may put out some true information, there might be other things happening. So the omission of certain facts is lying by omission. The changing of like only steering the narrative in a certain way was done by mainstream in the Epstein case, and also by the attorneys. We saw that the narrative stayed in a certain direction, not including things that were part of it. And so there's another motive, and what I've seen is that there is a direct correlation of people who lie by omission or just steer the narrative in protecting these intelligence agencies. I mean, that's what I've been able to ascertain. Because like in one case, for example, I'm not going to name the person. There was a credible witness who said during a deposition he was a child as slave. During a deposition when he was older, he made it very clear that he saw Hunter Thompson, the author, do something horrible at Bohemian Grove, which ended in the not alive for a little child. But this person refuses to talk about it. I have seen 2 shows where this person was specifically told to say what he knows about Hunter Thompson, and he's like, I'd rather not. I'm not going to mention it. So, like, really? Why? I mean, really? So who are you protecting? Hunter Thompson is one of a slew of writers who benefited from a program that funded writers of his time. Who underwrote that program? The 3-letter agency. They also funded Andy Warhol. I mean, I write about all of this on my Substack. Well, enough of my ranting. I am very curious to hear what you have to say. Please keep your thoughts, send positive light to Jaguar, Wright, and Katt Williams, who are being incredibly brave, who have been talking the truth for years, and who are finally being heard. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Give this a like, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.